You said bell peppers and beef.
His name's Asimov Solensen.
Hey guys, welcome on in. Welcome back to another video. It's your boy Young Blake, and in today's news-like video, we're going to be talking about the Game of the Year. Not necessarily talking about most of the games that are nominated for Game of the Year. I'll give you guys a little bit of my 2 cents on that. Instead, we're going to be talking about mostly the flops of the year on some games that should have performed a lot better than they did and just were absolute disappointments. First and foremost, let's go ahead and talk about the Game of the Year nominations and who I think is going to potentially win. I'm not going to go in depth for these games. I'm not going to give you the full descriptions or anything like that. You know Alan Wake 2 is the 2023 Survival Horror Game of the Year. You know Baldur's Gate 3 is the 2023, role-play Game of the Year. What I'm going to do with this little portion is I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on who is actually going to win Game of the Year Game of the Year award, and I absolutely can't wait to see if I'm actually correct in this. I don't believe it's going to be Alan Wake 2. I don't believe it's going to be Spider-Man 2 either. Something that one of my buddies had mentioned that the game just dropped. I 100% agree with him. I don't think that those 2 games just being dropped is going to have enough behind it to make it Game of the Year. But I am absolutely glad to see it in Game of the Year nominations because it's absolutely deserving to be in the nominations in my opinion. Now, moving on to Resident Evil 4 and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Resident Evil 4, I don't think is going to be Game of the Year because we know that we're going to get another Resident Evil remake next year. I don't think we're going to get Resident Evil 4 remake is going to be a Game of the Year. Kind of interesting to see a remake is in the nominations, but I'm going to digress a little bit. Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Super Mario Bros. Is great, and the Nintendo Bros. Absolutely love Mario, but I don't know if a palette change and new abilities is going to be enough to push Super Mario over the edge when you compare it to the next 2 entries that I'm about to mention, and that's going to be Baldur's Gate 3 and Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, Baldur's Gate 3, Lorian did an amazing job. I have hours in Baldur's Gate 3, right? Absolute hours. I loved that game. I feel like, the build-up for Baldur's Gate 3 was spectacular. Lorian did an amazing job with their loot drops that they did, the special edition stuff that they did for that game. I feel like they advertised this game correctly. I think that it was phenomenal what they did, and the gameplay is amazing. Falls short on a few little things, but that can be overlooked with the vast amount of things that you can do in this game. I've played the game over 5 times in 5 different runs, right? And with each run, I still find something new that I haven't found in the previous run. That's outstanding to have all of those little nuggets in this game. Makes you really want to play through every single class and just do anything and everything that you can in Baldur's Gate. Every single weapon, every single dialogue option, talking to every single animal. It's absolutely a phenomenal game, and I truly loved what Lorian did with Baldur's Gate. I don't think, though, it's up there. It's definitely up there. But I think the winner of Game of the Year this year is going to be Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And listen, if you disagree, I don't know why. Everybody that played Breath of the Wild were absolutely foaming at the mouth when Tears of the Kingdom got announced. Just announced years before it released. Every single person that I'm friends with on Twitch, every single recommended at the time, were all Tears of the Kingdom. Every last one of them. And I enjoyed watching Tears of the Kingdom. I enjoyed the brand new things that they did to the game. I still have friends till this day that have beat the game and are still playing the game. And just like Baldur's Gate 3, finding new things that they didn't know you could do in Tears of the Kingdom. I think that Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is going to win. It makes sense as the second entry into the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom entries. Of course, this is not the second entry of Zelda entirely. I'm not stupid, but between those 2 games, I believe Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild won Game of the Year, and it only makes sense that this game wins Game of the Year as well. Now, This is probably going to catch me a lot of flack, and the reason being is because a lot of people believe that this game should be in the nominations, and so I'm going to give it an honorary mention before we get to the flops. This is not a flop. This is just an honorary mention of a game as to why it's not, Game of the Year material. And that's going to be Hogwarts Legacy. Now, look, I know I'm going to catch some flack on this, but hear me out. Hogwarts Legacy was a great game. Don't get me wrong. I wanted to play it really bad when it came out. I did the little pre-email stuff. Building am I in? Am I a Hufflepuff? Am I a Gryffindor? It was a Gryffindor. No, duh. I'm pretty jockey in my IRL life, so it makes sense that I would be pretty jockish in a fantasy life. But that being said, this game's not Hall of Fame. This game is not Game of the Year worthy, and there's a couple of reasons why I'm mentioning that. And you could be like, oh, but Spider-Man 2 just came out. How is that already? Look, listen, all right, check it. So the game was great. It looked amazing. It was packed full of customization for a character creation. Amazing. It's great. It's awesome. However, watching somebody play the game and 2 days later, they're already on playthrough number 2, playthrough number 3, playthrough number 4, playthrough number 5 within a week, that kind of got a little boring. They already know what's going to happen. They already know what's going to, now they're starting to change things up. They want to go through a different building. They want to be a raven, whatever. Okay, cool. But what else is appealing to this game? And I think that's probably one of the ways that it suffered a lot. And don't get me wrong, one of my buddies, Goblin Tuesday, you guys can go check him out. He's absolutely phenomenal. He had very strong criticism over my opinions, which, he's entitled to. And he was one of the people that believed that this game should be at least considered as a Game of the Year nomination. But I just don't think so. Hogwarts Legacy is a great game. Don't get me wrong. It is a really great game. Plays well on all ports. Graphics looks great. Like I said, decent selection of customizations and all that. And the spells look amazing. The way that they brought the spells to life, phenomenal. The open world isn't so open, and that kind of hinders it quite a bit. The story mode is about 25 hours. There's side content that pushes it to 67 hours, and that's pretty bad if your game is mostly side content. Now, side content is supposed to be on the side, as in it's supposed to be minimal. It's supposed to be second half of the game, but a very small fraction of that second half, not the majority of the game. I feel like mostly where a lot of the continuation of people playing the game and putting the game out there was the diehard, like, Harry Potter fans. And I'm not saying Harry Potter fans are bad. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons why it's probably not going to be Game of the Year, is because at this point, the only people backing it are Harry Potter fans, not just overall game enthusiasts. Basically, and the long and short of it is, I feel like the general hype for the game died down really fast in just a few weeks. Was it a huge success upon release? Yes, it was amazing. Did it keep the focus though? From 1.2 million viewers upon release to a skydive plummet of half those numbers in the first 3 days, did well for a short time in comparison to titles like Baldur's Gate 3, who were released with smaller numbers, but less of a fall-off during its time of peak until now. And I think that's one of the reasons why it shouldn't be considered Game of the Year, but I wanted to go ahead and get the flack out of the start of the video and talk about that just for a little bit. On to the flops of the year, which will end with my choice of biggest flop of the year. First and foremost, we have Lord of the Rings Golem. Lord of the Rings Golem was a game at first seemed very interesting to everyone. Even I thought I might crack open the pocketbook and get this game. I do love me some Tolkien, and also I feel like Golem is a character that has quite a bit of lore, but I just wanted more lore of them. I feel like Golem is a very interesting character with the split personality thing going on, the complete and total mental decline that they had over their years to become what they are till today. I thought that this was a great and perfect opportunity. Getting this game for free would have been too expensive for everybody. Poorly optimized, most people running top-of-the-line CPU, top-of-the-line GPUs, struggling, frame drops, low frames, struggling to get a solid 60 frames per second, and it's 2023. You hear it a lot. I'm going to say it even more and even louder. It's 2023. At this point in time, game developers should be dishing out games that are 60 frames per second, 1080p minimum, right? Most people playing this game had 3080s, 3090s, struggling, with Ryzen 9s, struggling. That shouldn't be the case. I know the 40 series are out, but still, guys, the 30 series is still pretty new. We shouldn't have games struggling to work on the 30 series, especially the higher end 30 series with Ryzen 7s and Ryzen 9s in them. Another thing, it was lack of content. This was like a crawl simulator. It was extremely slow. I found myself struggling through watching only one 20-minute episode of Moist Critical playing this game, and the only enjoyable parts that I found was just listening to him on the game. That was it. That was it. Another thing is, it struggled, and it had PlayStation 2 graphics at best. That's not good at all. That's not something that you want to have in your game. PlayStation 2 graphics, and it can't handle 60 frames per second at 1080p at minimum, and crashes constantly. Those are already 3 terrible points to a game, and there's more. It was a terrible addition to the story of an interesting character in an amazing world. Promo shots were over the stars compared to the actual game. Poor decision-based mechanics, with an author-issued apology and a closed developmental program on top of. Lord of the Rings Golem was a huge flop and upset to the fanbase. Hopefully, Return to Moria fills the void and more for the Middle-earth fans when that's set to drop next year. Remember that game with the over-sexual themes and the, yeah. That thing? Atomic Heart is a BioShock Infinite-like game. Even though Infinite was kind of lackluster in the BioShock worlds, we're not going to talk about that. What we are talking about, though, is a communist utopia with heavy sexual themes. Extra seasoning on the heavy sexual. The game's mechanics were okay. Repetitive simple puzzles, terrible scripting, and the story that is empty with an ending that doesn't really wrap the story up too well. The only reason to get this game is to add to the list of Crispy Critters compilations.
Crispy critters.
Though the game had great expectations prior to release, only 10 minutes into the game, and you'll see why a lot of people instantaneously turned it off and refunded it. Again, yikes. Now, moving on to Forspoken. This game, I wanted it to be good. It had an interesting concept, and it just seemed really dope from the moment that it dropped. It had such a good potential with the story they had and the ideas that they were going with, but it fell so short. Good ideas for spells and travel mechanics, but becoming OP early happens a lot. Really turns the difficulty down to a minimum at best. I felt visually speaking, they seemed like PS4 graphics, and that's not too terribly bad. The PS4 is about, what, 10, 12, 14 years old now? But we live in a world where the PS5 exists, and therefore better graphical ceilings can be hit. Just like the previous titles, and a trend that will continue on with this list, Forspoken has a lack of content in its narrative, yet another main character with jokes that fall flat, and a character is very self-centered, with no regard to anything that happens in the world around them if it doesn't pertain to their situation. A game that definitely stung for a lot of Square Enix fans like me, who loves Final Fantasy, loves Kingdom Hearts through the good and bad of Kingdom Hearts. Square Enix always pumps out really good games, and for this game to just fall flat on its face kind of feels bad, honestly. Lastly, coming in for our final flop of the year is Starfield. Now, Starfield is absolutely a game that I was super excited to play. I'm not a huge Bethesda fan. I don't really play all of the Fallout series, but I do love Skyrim and most of the Elder Scrolls series. Please announce Elder Scrolls 6 next year. Please. Give us something. Starfield had an amazing idea, and I am huge into space sims, so I absolutely wanted to grab this game, and I have this game for free with Xbox Game Pass. Thankfully, I have it for free with Xbox Game Pass. It seemed like they had a lot of promises with the way that they were kind of vague with explaining a few things, but I will give them a little bit of slack, considering that we probably had huge expectations with it being a space sim game under a huge name like Bethesda. But of course, the pros of it is it's a Bethesda game. The cons of it is it's a Bethesda game. Starfield has a little, it's got a lack of depth. It's only got 4 worlds that you could, 4 cities that you could visit. Perceivable undelivered promises. Feels as though this is like a No Man's Sky type situation though, so I'm not going to talk too much on Starfield. Clearly this is in the flops, but it's not going to be flop of the year. Because I think Starfield with Bethesda, I think that Starfield, given, a few patches and a few DLC drops, hopefully probably free to add more cities and add more depth into the game, would have a more of a No Man's Sky situation. As long as Bethesda listens to its community and does its community right, then it will flourish to be an amazing game. If you guys believe that another game should have been considered Game of the Year, let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, this is, the shameless plug time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you guys know whenever I drop a new video. Let's go ahead and get on to my Flop of the Year award. And that award is going to Lord of the Rings Golem. Guys, do better. Forspoken is a new game. Of course, it's Square Enix, and I feel like Square Enix should have absolutely hit the ballpark with this game. But I don't think that Forspoken was going to be a game that Square Enix was really going to significantly push for Game of the Year. And Atomic Heart was done by developer Mundfish, which I had to search them up and figure out what other games that they published. This is probably the most known game that they've published, especially recently, considering how recent it dropped. But I'm not too familiar with Mundfish. So yeah, at that point in time, I wouldn't say that Mundfish flopped too hard. In fact, this was probably could be looked at as their first game into like a serious, entry that a lot of people picked up, but sadly returned. I think Mundfish is okay. They don't deserve the biggest flop. Golem deserves the biggest flop because not only does Daedric, however you pronounce their company, had the rights to one of the biggest and one of the most popular media outlets, with that being Lord of the Rings, but for them to have the amount, just the vast amount of opportunities that they could use with Golem and just absolutely make the game as terrible as possible, it doesn't make sense to me. Again, game crashes shouldn't be happening. PS2 graphics, when it looks like it's stellar, when you look at the trailers, absolutely disgusting, right? I believe that Lord of the Rings Golem is one of the biggest flops to come out of the 2023 game listings, and that's a vast list of games. So my flop of the year goes to Lord of the Rings Golem. And that's also going to wrap up this video. If you guys agree with the video, definitely let me know. If you disagree with anything in the video, the comment section is down below. I read your guys' comments. So, hit me up, let me know what you think. And yeah, if you guys want to talk to me live, follow me on my Twitch. And yeah, like I said, smash button, all that stuff, all that jazz. That's all I got for you guys in this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye, guys.
Special